Welcome to the CSBP Fertilisers Grow Better podcast, sharing knowledge with growers on leading crop nutrition, sustainable agriculture and other issues impacting the agricultural industry.
Hello, welcome everyone to the CSBP Grow Better podcast. My name's Johnston and we're joined here by Rusty Burke, our Supply Chain Manager, and Angus McAlpine, our Senior Account Manager, Nutrition and Sales. Rusty, Angus, welcome to the show.
Hey, Gray.
Rusty is familiar, of course, to the viewers of the Grow Better podcast, but Angus, we're meeting you here for the first time. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your role at CSBP?
These days I'm Senior Account Manager in Nutrition and Sales. So started with CSBP back in 2013, helping roll out the new Logic program, which is our nutritional advice platform, and started in field research and trials to help manage that, and that gave me a really good nutritional understanding and knowledge to then move on to deal with customers and manage accounts as I still do today.
Wonderful background and wonderful to have you here. And Rusty, you're obviously familiar to many of our growers across the agricultural region and a legend in the West Australian procurement of fertiliser space. What are some of the challenges you've been seeing recently since we last caught up on the podcast?
Yeah, so we're in nitrogen top-up season, and the focus on the supply chain changes quite a lot at this time of year. By now we've really got the contracts in place, the ships on the way, and it's very much just the execution stage, and the challenge is really to get the urea and the flexi in the right place at the right time. Sounds very simple. The challenge at this time of year are really the congestion at the ports, rain delays. And as the demand moves, as rain patterns move through the state, the demand's different in different areas. So there's a lot of work getting to the stage where you can sit back and feel comfortable. There's the right amount in each place for the season, and I think we're finally there, and we breathe a big sigh of relief.
That sounds very reassuring and sounds like there's been a bit happening. So our theme for today is how is the 2023 season shaping up from a pricing and procurement and a nutritional advice perspective. I guess before we get into that, and obviously very happy to have both of you here to touch on those themes. Before we get into that, perhaps we should round out what's happening in 2022. And Rusty, you talked about we've been focused on nitrogen and making sure we've got the product available. I guess you've probably been out and about. Angus, do you want to just give a bit of a summary of how you see 2022 shaping up and finishing off?
Yeah, so season to date, I guess recent rains have really kept the season on track. We had late autumn, March, April rains meant we could seed canola early and get that established. And following through to May, all the cereals were mostly out of the ground before the end of the month. So in the northern region, that means we've got increased yield potential with earlier sown crops. And then leading into August now with recent rains, it means we're really setting up that tail end of the season to actually realise those high yield potentials.
And so what are the growers you're talking to at the moment? What are they thinking about? What are they focused on?
So this time of the year is, trying to match our nitrogen supply to the crop demand, trying to target those high yield potentials. We need to just increase those nitrogen rates over some paddocks to make sure we hit the target yields and proteins. Nitrogen decision making hinges on, what our yield potential is or what our expectations are for our ending yield. So that then comes back to setting up our nitrogen demand. When we catch up on farm, we review the soil results to see what our nitrogen supply has been from the soil, what fertiliser have we applied to date, how's the crop looking with tissue testing and CSBP Detect. We can help establish those levels. Then the conversation is around crop stage, mid-stem elongation, wheat crop or full flower canola are perfect timings to apply Flexi-N in season. So currently we've just had reasonable rainfall. That's probably lifted our yield expectations for the remainder of the season. And then we review how much nitrogen we may need and then execute on that plan. The discussions around that extra nitrogen decision making is obviously economics. Current prices are high, but that doesn't mean it's uneconomical to apply. The return on investments are still very strong. Your current nitrogen prices, you're still looking at least a 2-to-1 return conservatively for every dollar spent on N to get a return back in grain.
So not everyone out there can have Angus come and visit them, but we do have a team of account managers out there, and people should get in touch with their account manager if they're interested in talking about nitrogen for the rest of the year.
Absolutely. The timing is now. The crops are continuing to grow, so the window to apply more will close eventually. So we need to get in before that and maximise the season we got right now.
And Rusty, you mentioned before you've been working hard to make sure that nitrogen is available to our growers in the WA market.
Yep.
We in a good position at the moment?
Really good, really happy with the position. Lots of space in the appointment book. We've got enough urea in the sheds and Flexion in the tanks, and that's to cover us through the rest of the season. And we've got the next Flexion vessel arriving in August, and that'll give us plenty for the pre-fill season as well.
So it sounds like from a grower weather perspective and from a nutrition availability perspective, where it's been some challenges, and obviously the grower position is not consistently good across the state, but season 2022, all things considered, shaping up reasonably well and could have a decent end to the season.
Yeah, definitely.
Looking ahead then to 2023, and it's going to be honest, before we know it, this is the time of year when I think we start having the conversations with growers around what are the things that we should be thinking about as we're planning and budgeting for our rotations and our nutrition spend for next year. What are the types of things, I guess, from your perspective, Rusty, that growers should be thinking about and that you're starting to factor into the procurement profile for the season to come?
Really, what we're looking at is the global market, global fertiliser market, because as I've often said, we're just price takers. So whatever happens out there influences us here. I've tried to think of what are the themes at the moment. There are probably three key themes in the fertiliser market. The one is that the prices are high. If you look at prices versus any definition of normal, they are well up across all three nutrients. The second one is that we're probably looking at higher prices this season than last season. So why is that? Last season we had the benefit of buying product as prices were rising. At this stage, it doesn't look as though we're going to have that benefit this season. We're sitting with high prices. So probably prices will be higher across all nutrients than we finished up last season. And then maybe the last theme is that it is just really difficult to forecast where these go from here. And we always say that, but if I try and back that up with a few examples, if you look at maybe two of the biggest influences on pricing at the moment, it's the Russian invasion of Ukraine and what's going to happen on that. And the second one is what is China going to do on its export restrictions? How hard is it going to go on that? And really, there are probably two people in the world who know the answers to that, and that's Putin and Xi Jinping. And so for us to try and say what they're going to do and where they're going to go, we can look at scenarios, but that's pretty tough going. So those are the themes common across all the nutrients. But maybe if I go into a little bit on each one. If I look at potassium, as I said, fits the theme. Price is way higher than normal. They probably, we're probably looking at prices now about double what they were at the end of that we paid last season. So a significant difference there, and the factors influencing it. Well, those are probably more robust than in the other two because, we've said this often, but the potash market is dominated by three countries: Canada, Belarus, and Russia. Two of those have got serious restrictions on them because of the way the world views the Russian invasion of Ukraine and Belarus's assistance in that. And it's hard to see how that's going to unwind in the short term. So it looks as though potash will be structurally short for a while. So that's the potash one. On the phosphate side, probably phosphate prices are about double of what they would normally be. The future of where those prices go, they again, what's China going to do in its export policies on phosphates? And then the other big influence at the moment is we talk about phosphates, but they're actually ammonium phosphates. MAP and DAP are ammonium phosphates. So ammonia is a big part of that. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia's a huge gas producer. It's restricting gas into Europe. That's driving gas prices up, and that drives ammonia prices up. So that's flowing through to the phosphate industry. So phosphates, again, not great news there. And then nitrogen, similar story. Probably the difference in nitrogen is we're seeing just this ongoing volatility. We used to be able to look at nutrients and say, all we need to work out is the trend. Is it on the way down or is it on the way up? And then you don't worry too much about the noise, the things that influence it day by day. But in nitrogen, that noise is so overriding structural trends, you just can't ignore it. And if I choose an example, in the last week, urea prices have gone up between 100 and 150 US dollars. Russia decided that they were going to restrict the gas into Europe, and the flow-on effects of that, they just go around the world. And if gas starts flowing again to Europe, we might see it coming down. So really, really hard to manage on that side. And then if you look at the common things across the nutrients, freight, again, off the highs. And there's some green shoots that we can look at on the freight side. But versus normal prices, we're still well up. And then the last one is exchange rate. If I look at the exchange rate last year and compare with this year, the Australian dollar is about 8% weaker this year, and that means there's an 8% increase in Australian dollar prices because everything's bought in US dollars. So I'm afraid not a lot of good news there. But
real ray of sunbeam there, right?
You can only manage the hand you dealt with, and that's the position at the moment, and we've got to work out what the best strategies are with that.
And it's a good suggestion to get Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping on the podcast at some point to explain their policies. We'll endeavour to do that in future episodes, but don't hold your breath. In lieu of them, we've got the two of you, and I guess Rusty has shared a comprehensive view of how things will be shaping up from a procurement and pricing perspective heading into 2023. Some meaty challenges there, I guess, Angus, for growers to interpret and digest with the support of their account managers. How should growers be thinking about that, and what would be the things you'd be pointing them to?
Probably the biggest challenge to get a head around is these very high input prices, but that doesn't mean it's unprofitable to apply fertiliser to grow a crop. So the fundamental nutrients required to grow a tonne of wheat hasn't changed in the last year, even though the input prices are higher. So at the end of the day, what our soils can't provide nutritionally, we need to apply as a fertiliser, and that's where we need to focus on the return on investment for our fertiliser spend.
In terms then of how CSBP can help customers approach those challenges and think around that return on investment and fertiliser efficiency, what's the kind of support that you'd be talking to them around CSBP being able to provide them for the upcoming season?
One of those key points would be soil testing. That's a perfect way to establish what our baseline nutrition is in our soil. Obviously, testing deep is really important to understand the nutrients at depth as well, because they all contribute to what we need to grow the crop. We obviously then set like a target yield for our wheat crop that we might want to grow, and then we need to see what the gap is, and then what fertiliser we need to apply to achieve that target yield.
So Angus, I guess hearing Rusty's story there around elevated pricing, people's instinctive reaction would immediately be cut rates.
Yeah, so it comes back to, again, our soil nutrition. If you're cutting a key nutrient that is required to meet our target yield, and then not applying that nutrient reduces our yield, you might save dollars per hectare, but you're going to lose hundreds of kilos of wheat, which is far more costly in the end.
And Rusty has, I think, a little bit of luxury of looking at each of the nutrient categories in isolation, whereas what I've learned since I've been with the business and in the fertiliser industry is, in fact, there are these interactive effects where you can cut rates on one and it reduces the efficiency of the other. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yep. So potassium is one of those key nutrients that having inadequate K levels in the plant will reduce our nitrogen use efficiency significantly. Also, K-deficient plants will have lower water use efficiency, which again, every year we're trying to maximise every drop of water that's given to us. So in the worst case scenario where we're reducing our potassium inputs, we need to really consider our yield potential, and then that drives our nitrogen decision making.
So hearing Rusty say that K prices in particular are elevated and feel like they may structurally stay higher, pulling back K rates could actually effectively, make your N more expensive even if you're using that N less efficiently.
That's right. So if your soil is deficient in K, you still need to apply it. And if the crop is then deficient in potassium and you apply more nitrogen, you can actually have a yield penalty and make that problem far worse. So you're spending more money to actually get a negative return. So you're better off looking at the soil nutrients as a whole and applying a balance of nitrogen and potassium in this example to make sure we're getting both right.
And that's the sort of thing that a new logic recommendation will help a customer understand?
Absolutely. So when we test the soil, we don't just look at individual nutrients in isolation, we look at the whole suite. A wheat plant needs all the nutrients to grow. NPK are the key macronutrients, so we need to make sure we're supplying what we need to grow our target yield.
And Angus, I know you talked about your involvement when you joined CSBP in the trials program. I know you love to get out and stay involved in the program now. Can you talk to us about some themes you're seeing through the program this year?
On that nitrogen topic, we've got 2 really good trials, one at Three Springs and one at Lake Grace in the south. That trial is basically showing the 2 nitrogen strategies of either banding at seeding or applied top dressed at seeding or post. So we're seeing really good levels of nutrient uptake through tissue testing with the banded applications compared to the top dress ones. We'll have to follow these through to yield and obviously do analysis on the grain protein, and that'll help us establish what our economic returns are, but also help us determine what our efficiency gains were from that banded application, and then we can take that information and help make better decisions as we go into 2023 with elevated nitrogen prices.
So there's lots of good messages there and lots of capability within the CSBP team, both in terms of the people we have and the tools we have available to support growers for the remainder of this season and to think about planning for season 2023. Rusty, you shared some very well thought out and well developed views on the way the market is shaping up. And I know you're not going to position yourself as a forecaster, but are there any other messages looking forward you think we should share with our growers?
It sort of goes with the theme that Angus is talking about. You know, the more information you have, the better the decisions you can make, because the consequences of the decisions we make at the moment are enormous because of the prices of everything. And you know, personally, I'm enjoying this process. You know, a very wise supplier of ours says, you know, you're witnessing history at the moment. Enjoy it. I mean, it's not every year that you have a pandemic and Russia invading the Ukraine. So there's some. I don't say they're good things, but we're part of it, and we should just find the best ways of navigating our way through this and managing the risk, and information is key.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rusty, there. It's certainly interesting times at the moment. I guess from what we can provide on farm to our growers is really that confidence going forward with our nutritional advice. So now more than ever, that focus on return on investment of our fertiliser spend is very important. It is always important to make sure we're getting a return, but with the elevated prices, you know, double historical levels, it's really important that we work closely with our growers and use our tools, extend our research and trial work over many years to not only myself be confident in the decision we're making, but I want the grower to be confident too in what we're doing on farm.
I think there's some really nice messages there. Clearly some challenging times, but at CSBP we also clearly have some great skills and capabilities to be able to help, as Rusty says, navigate these things as best we can. It'd be nice if we didn't have these challenging outlooks, but at the same time, I hope that the growers out there do get the sense, as I'm getting from speaking with both of you, that we're doing our best to manage these things on behalf of our industry. I think we've provided a really nice picture of the outlook for the 2023 season, and also some practical steps growers can take for the remainder of 2022 to make sure that they're grabbing every last bit of yield that is available to them, given the recent rains. That's it. Thank you to Rusty Burke and Angus McAlpine for joining me on the CSBP Grow Better podcast today.
Thanks, Gray.
Remember to slide into our DMs and provide any feedback or suggestions you've got for the show, and to follow us on our socials at CSBP Fertilisers on all your favourite social platforms. Thanks, Angus. Thanks, Rusty. I've been Gray Johnston. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the CSBP Grow Better podcast. For more information about CSBP, please visit csbp-fertilisers.com.au or connect with us on social media at CSBP Fertilisers on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn. This podcast is provided as general information only. The content of this podcast is not a recommendation and has been prepared without taking your objectives or circumstances into account. Before acting on the content of this, you should consider its appropriateness to your circumstances and seek independent advice.